Hey guys, welcome back to the From Mourning to Meaning interview series, where we're learning how to break through the intolerable grief and return to meaningful living. I'm Isabel, and today I have with me Sherrie Dunlevy. Sherrie, thank you so much for joining us.
Laura, it's my pleasure.
Awesome. Now, for those of you that don't know Sherrie, she is a former NBC News anchor, best-selling author, inspirational speaker, and the founder of Graduating Grief. Now, Sherrie, I know you wrote best-selling books and built a business about and around graduating grief with a support group and a podcast.
Mhm.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and also let us know how you even got into that, how your life led you to that?
Okay, well, it started 22 years ago when I was still on television. My husband and I were pregnant with our second child, Brandon, and we learned through our first ultrasound that there were going to be some problems. And we didn't know the severity of the problems until we were referred to specialists. And then we
Mhm.
realized that we were in a fight for his life and spent most of the pregnancy trying to come up with the plan of how we would proceed with his birth and make sure that he could survive outside the womb. We were actually consulting to see if we could have surgery in utero,
Mm.
but that was not a possibility. They told us his chances for survival were too great because that was like the last, the last ditch effort.
Yeah.
So we were filled with hope, thinking that he would be okay, but that was not the case. He was born, and he never left the hospital. He was in intensive care the entire time. He was on a heart lung machine called ECMO. He had surgery on ECMO. He was at the time at the hospital the longest surviving baby that had been on that machine, and we were making progress. But then one day it just started going downhill. And so a lot of people knew me because I was in the public eye all the time. And so that was very difficult. So after he died, I did return to work, but it was just very, very difficult. I had a 3-year-old at home, and I, you know, made the decision about a year after my son died that I really needed to focus on my family and my healing. And so I left that public life for a while. And during that time, we lost some of our closest friends, which was so hurtful. So the reason I'm telling you all of this is because years down the road, as I started to heal and started to feel better, one of those friends who abandoned us at the time called me 6 years later and just wanted to pick up where we left off. What's new? What's going on? And I thought, we don't get to do this now. That's you. I wish you were there with me holding my hand as I was going through this.
Yeah.
And so after I got off that call, I wasn't angry. I was just, what was that about? And I had talked to other people about it, and I realized that that's a common thing in grief, is that some people will abandon you. And so it was called upon my heart to write a book to help people who don't know what to do and say, who may be too afraid to reach out. They're afraid they're going to make you cry. They're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. They're scared to death because they've never come in contact with anyone who has lost a child, a father, a brother. They've never dealt with death before, or it's never been modeled for them. So I wrote this book. My career in television as a reporter helped me interview people who had gone through these losses. And so
Mhm.
I asked them, well, what did your friends and family do that best helped you? And I collected all of their answers and all of their stories, and I put it into my book, How Can I Help? So that was my first foray into, you know, um, turning this kind of into a business, so to speak. I call it more of a mission. I want people, we don't talk about these things. We don't talk about grief. We don't talk about death. We don't, and we become so uncomfortable and we become so paralyzed about it that I just read today. I'm on a mission to help people talk about this as comfortably as they would talk about anything else in life. Talk about the weather. It is something that happens to every single one of us. And yet when it does, we act like we're in shock that it shouldn't. And because of that, we're really putting ourselves in a position of suffering that doesn't have to be so. We could get through it a lot better. We could be supporting each other a lot better. If we could make the conversation general and comfortable, it would be so much more healing for people that are grieving. So that's the story to the book. And then the story to Graduating Grief really just came from, especially during COVID, I kept going into support groups of people who have lost loved ones, because I was doing a podcast for another organization. And what I was finding was there were a lot of new grievers coming into these groups and being met by other grievers who will lead them to believe that healing isn't possible and that there is no hope and that they will always be sorrowful. And I just don't believe that. I personally believe that we can grow through this, that our lives can be enhanced and we can learn rich, valuable lessons that we can use to move our lives forward in a positive way. You know, my son, his chapter of life was 29 days. But mine is right now 59 years. So I can't make those 29 days the definition of these 59 years.
Yeah, of course.
That would hold me prisoner. And that was my son's story. My story continues. So I want people to realize that, you know, there is life after grief, and there can be an amazing life after grief. And we can do that if we plug into our purpose and passion and find our joy again. So that's pretty much what it is. It's more like a mission to help people through this.
That's awesome. I love that. Now, let me ask you. So I know you said you want to help them find life after grief. So I know a lot of people sometimes say you never get over the grief. So you do believe that you can get over the grief?
Okay, I do believe that we do not have to be held prisoner to the pain of grief. There's a difference.
Yeah.
No. And since embarking on all of this, which I started it at the end of 2020, and I've had 2 significant losses in my family since then. I just lost my father 5 weeks ago. So I'm fresh back at the beginning of a new grief journey. And even though my head knows that I'll be okay right now, my heart is not okay, right?
Definitely.
But I know that I'm not going to be held prisoner to this. I know that I have to do the work. I know that it's going to take time and work to move through. And it doesn't mean that I'm never going to shed a tear about my father or my son or my beloved dog, who I just lost too. But it just means that I'm not going to shield myself and live in a grief cave or a grief prison. And so many people, they live there. And I want them to realize that there is a big, beautiful world outside of that grief cave.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, I love how you are okay with sharing that you're a grief coach. You're a coach on this. This is something that you deal with on a daily basis. And you just went through deaths yourself recently. And you just said it, you need time. So even though you've gone through this, you yourself need time also. So it's something normal. It's very normal for everyone. It's not something that you can just know how to get through, right?
No, I mean, I technically do know how to get through, right? But but your brain and your heart have a disconnect there. Your brain is on a journey. It's on a mission to make sense of the senseless right now. It wants to know answers. It wants to know why. It wants to know, wants to know. And it doesn't matter what the answers are, because the outcome is still the same. It doesn't matter at all. The why does not matter at all, because the outcome is still, it's not going to change anything. Right. And so I have to heal the heart. In fact, I put my Graduating Grief podcast on hold temporarily. I sent out a newsletter, I sent out to my followers, I sent out a newsletter and said, I have to take care of me right now and it's okay. But I think that models to them that, even people that they feel are the experts in all of this, I want this to be authentic. I don't want it to capitalize on it. I want to be respectful of my grief, but I don't want to hide it either. I want
Yeah.
them to realize that, whatever you choose to do is okay. But that even if you think someone has it all together, they might not. And like I say, I'm not okay, but I know I will be okay, and that keeps me
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah, it's a process. You can't expect from one day to another just because you've either gone through it before or because you deal with it on a daily basis on someone else's terms as well. It's not going to change that. You still need to go through that process. It's not from
Mhm.
one day to another. It's not a switch that you click and it's like, there, I'm good. I'm brand new. No,
No,
it's a daily thing. And like you said, it's not something that leaves you. You take it with you, but you learn to live with it. So you're still going through that process to get to that part, where you're living with it, with the joys of having that person in your life at one point, and all those great things. So
right.
it's a
Right.
process.
Yeah. Getting to the point where you can see pictures and you can cry tears of appreciation that you had that experience
Yeah.
instead of crying tears that you'll never have that experience again.
Yeah. And then when you actually get there, those tears are actually beautiful. They're actually
Yes.
beautiful experiences that you feel. So it's very different as well.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think in the United States, and I don't know where, how other cultures are around the world, but we're taught to, keep a stiff upper lip and to keep it to yourself. And I
Mm-mm.
think that because of that, and someone says, "How are you today?" And we're always supposed to answer, "I'm great, I'm fine, I'm wonderful." And sometimes we're not. And people don't know how to act when you say, "I'm not having a very good day today." Oh,
It's
so I want to
true.
try to normalize that. I'm not trying to capitalize on it. I'm not trying to gather pity. I'm just trying to say authentically that, to think that every day can be a fabulous, wonderful day, we're fooling ourselves. It's not. But wouldn't it be nice? Someone said to me yesterday, I was calling a friend and we were talking. I started crying, and he said, I didn't mean to make you cry, Sherry. And I said, you didn't make me cry. You made me remember. And I would rather cry with a friend than cry alone.
It's true.
Right? So we have to be, as
Definitely.
friends, comfortable to sit there. We can't fix it. There's nothing you can do, but you can witness
Mhm.
it and be there, a loving presence.
It's true. Someone once told me, I was at a service and the pastor was saying, we go through life lying to people because they ask us, how are we doing? And the response is automatically, great, good, we're doing good, life is great, the day is awesome. So those are like the automatic responses. And on the contrary, on the other side, we're so used to hearing that as well. So we're not used to sharing how we really feel. But at the same time, when we hear someone actually share how they really feel, we kind of like shut down and we're like, okay, walk away now. We don't know what to say to that. We don't know how
Right.
to add something there. And it's not just with grief, but it magnifies with grief. And
Yes.
it's something that we really need to learn how to bring it out, not just share it, but listen to it, because sometimes it's not that we have to, even if we don't have nothing to say, sometimes they just need to share it. So we need to be able to have that okay to hear it and okay to say it.
Yes. It's to learn how to be a silent witness.
Yes, I love how you said that. Yes, exactly, a silent witness. Perfect.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I know when we were talking last time, you were telling me about the death of your father, and which I'm so grateful that you actually decided to participate. I don't know how you got it in you to do that with it happening so recently. Um, but you were telling me a little bit about the complexity of grievers, um, who primary grievers and all
Yes.
that sort. Can you explain to us a little bit more about that and how you feel about that, or how your thought process on that?
Well, when I lost my son, it was my son, right? It was my husband's son. So
Mhm.
he was also my son's brother. He was also my mother's grandson, my father's grandson, whatever. But because he was our son, we were the primary grievers. And I never thought of it this way before. But with the death of my dad, my mom is still alive. So she's the primary griever. So I found that even in my deepest sadness, after my dad died, and he died after a long hospital stay and it was out of town. So, after we left the hospital, I was in charge of getting my mother home to her, in the car, home, packed up, 2.5 hours, getting her back home. I couldn't break down. I was responsible, for driving and getting us there safely and getting her in her house. And, I was devastated and the waves of grief were coming over me. And I realized that it wasn't about my grief right now. It was about supporting her in her grief, because this was her lifelong partner and this was her husband. It was my dad, and he is my dad, and he is my son's grandfather. But right now, the energies had to go into supporting my mother. And
Yeah.
so this grief was a different kind of grief, because I had to hold it back in some manners in order to serve my mom. And
Yeah.
so I found that, um, I don't think I was stuffing it down. I think I just had to put it here on the side for right now. And I remember when I drove home and I got into my house and I was with my husband, then I was in a safe space to finally just have that initial cry, right?
Yeah.
But I find that happening, you have to be a little bit stronger, because it's really truly, I'm grieving my dad, but it's not just mine right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So not only, so it's not so much that you ignored your grief,
No.
you were just putting it on hold because there was someone else you had to be a bit stronger for, since they were the primary griever, as you said.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
So
never
in a way
thought
you're
about it that
growing.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also thought, I also have noticed this about grief, and I don't know, even though, I lost my dog, my beloved dog, who was like my baby. I
Yeah.
think that's probably why it just was so excruciating at first. I've noticed that the loss of my dog was an excruciating pain like I have not felt in, I can't remember how long. And yet the pain with my dad's grief is like a dull ache that just won't go away.
Hmm.
And so I've noticed even the way the pain is showing up for me is completely different. And so I'm observing all of this now, because you know what I mean? Like most people probably wouldn't observe that, but I'm observing it. And I think that it's helpful because it's allowing me to say that every grief experience is different. And
Yeah.
so, even though you think you're as prepared as you possibly can be, something's going to show up differently, that's going to present itself in a way that's either going to be like a stab to the heart, or it's just going to be like a dull ache, like a back pain that never goes away. You know what I mean? A heart pain that never goes away. And
Hmm.
so, it's just very, very interesting time for me, as well as a painful time for me right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that we always tend to talk about how we don't know the experience of someone else, right? For example, your father passed, my father passed. I can't possibly imagine what you're going through, right? We can have an idea of how we might feel, the emotions that we might feel along the way, but we can't really understand someone's experience. But I think also understanding that even on your own, when you go through different griefs in your life, they're so different, each and every one of them. So it's not like you've gone through one, well, now you know how to get yourself back up for the second one. You never know that.
Right.
It can be so different. There can be so many different needs that you will feel, emotions that you will feel. It's just so distinct one from the other.
Absolutely. And, I was writing in my journal today, which I really truly advocate people, working through your feelings through journaling, right? It really does help get it out, and get it on paper and get it out of your head, because I think
Yeah.
that's sometimes one of the most detrimental things about grief, is that if we don't have someone to witness it, if we don't have a way to talk about it, the stories keep building up in our heads. And so then we start living that story. We start seeing it as truth. But if you can get it out on paper, you can read it back, and maybe even 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, and go, is that true? Is that still true? Do I still believe that? And it can be so helpful.
Yeah.
So very, very helpful. But I was just talking about, all of these grief experiences being so different. And, one of the things, Laura, that I think is so important is it's once we realize that we're not alone, that someone else, like you've lost your father. And even though I know my experience and your experience is not the same, we can look at each other and we can go to this place in our heart where we have
Mm.
some kind of understanding,
Yeah.
where our friends with two parents, living parents, healthy parents, they don't know this yet,
Yeah.
right? They don't know this yet, but we have that somehow, that connection. And so, like when my son died, I said I felt like I was initiated into the Moms Without Children's Club without any, I did not want to be in this club, but I was
Yeah, of
never so
course.
grateful to know that there were other members, to know that I wasn't the only one.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's so true. Um, when you go through a loss in general, I think there's a connection with people that have the similar loss as you. That is, it's kind of like um, you have this trust and this empathy towards someone that you might not even know, but that
Mhm.
just all of a sudden connects you, and it's like a full understanding now, right? That you can
Yes.
totally comprehend them for some reason. You don't know why, but you can totally understand them, and when they speak to you and when they share with you, you can really feel them.
Yes, yes, that's beautifully put. Yes, it's almost like it opened up this portal of connection.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. Now, I know before you had mentioned um, what drove you to do your podcast and your support group. And well, I'm not sure about the podcast. I know the support group was that you would go to different groups and you would see grievers kind of telling other grievers it's not going to pass, time will not heal, and all these things. So what is the difference in the support group that you have created? What is the atmosphere there? What is the message there?
Okay. So the message behind graduating grief is that you can graduate from the pain of your grief and step into living and loving your life again. That's what I want people to do. So this is a group for people who say, like I went to a support group after my son died. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. The people were lovely. They they offered us so much love and support. But there came a day, about a year out, where I told my husband I don't want to go back anymore. And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I don't because some days I go there and I'm feeling pretty good. And when I leave there, I feel
Mm.
worse
Yeah.
because I have to tell my story again. And then I have to listen to all the new members telling their heartbreaking stories. I think I'm ready to start feeling good again." And I think that there are grievers out there who want to start feeling good again. They're afraid to admit it to anyone because they're afraid of being judged, right? And so this is a group for those people who want to choose life again, but are afraid. They're afraid of being judged. They're afraid, they feel a little bit guilty. How could I want to laugh and have joy again in my life when my son is buried, and he never got a chance to live his life. So I wanted to, I wanted to have a group of support and encouragement and provide tools for those people who want to step back into life again and let them know that it's okay. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. And so, for example, if someone comes in and said, you know what, my son's anniversary date is coming up, and I ran into one of his best friends, and I'm having such a hard time, seeing these friends his age moving on and enjoying life. Instead of, in a lot of other support groups, people will be saying, I know, that's the worst thing. I have to stay away from all my son's friends because it's just too painful. The members of my group say, have you tried this? This helped me when this happened with my son. This made me feel so much better when I did that. I was able to honor my son by bringing his friends together, and we just had, cocktails and told tales, and we laughed and we cried, and it was wonderful. That's the difference. That's the difference of our members want to lift up. If you fall down, we're going to lift you up and support you till you find your legs again, and gradually you can step into the light again.
Yes, that's awesome. Someone to support you, not hold you there and feel you, but really support you to bring you up. So that is beautiful.
Yes.
That's awesome. Now, I know that you also have something that you want to share with everybody that's watching today, something that you're going to offer. If you want to go ahead and tell them about that.
Sure. There are a lot of people that I just talked about, Laura, that have that fear, that have that guilt. I do want to smile again, but do I dare tell anyone,
Mm-hmm.
And especially, we put these timelines on grief. There might be someone, my dad's been gone for 5 weeks, but there are still times where I want to smile and I want to enjoy life, right? And I think that prior to having this philosophy and this outlook and knowing what I know, I might have felt guilty about that, right? So I have created the Graduating Grief Quiz. Are you ready? Take this quiz, find out if you're ready, and then I can go over the results with you. I can consult you and help you, move the notch forward, whether you're in the early stages, acute stages of grief, or you're working your way through it, or whether you're well on your way. This is a great way. These questions really help put you in a mindset of which direction are you moving. Are you going to, or do you want to move through this, or are you still a prisoner and need help moving through this? So take the quiz. And then I have offered you a free consultation afterwards so we can go over your results and talk about it.
Definitely. And yeah, I am going to give you guys a link for that so you guys can check it out. Like you said, it was a free quiz. So just go take it, see where you stand, and then she'll be more than happy to go over the results with you. Now, of course, everyone's in a different part of their grieving. Some people want to feel those emotions still. Some people just want to sit there and just take them all in first, and that's perfectly fine. But of course, if you are ready to move forward, it's always nice to have that support and have a group that can help you, and someone to kind of move you a little bit forward in case you don't know how. So thank you so much for offering that. That was awesome.
Yes. And if you don't want to take the quiz, and that's fine, you can still go to the Graduating Grief group in Facebook, and you can listen to the Graduating Grief podcast, which is for free, right? These are ways that you can dip your toes in the water if you don't think that you're quite ready. And there's no obligation to do the consult. If you don't want to, you can still take the quiz. You can still get your results. You don't have to talk with me, but I offer that for people because sometimes you don't have someone to listen.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you want to talk about those results and you don't
Yes.
know. Definitely. That's awesome. Thank you again. Now, let's say before we go, I want you to think of just one. I know there's probably 5,000, but if you can leave everybody watching with just one tip, one thing that you want them to remember, or you want them to think about doing, anything at all. It could be in any sense of the way, but something to take with them so that they can use during their grieving process. What would it be?
It's something that I'm using right now. I deliberately set out each day to find at least one thing that brings me joy. It could be standing in the grass in my bare feet. It could be, admiring a beautiful flower. It could be hearing a great song. But just joy is there. It's all around us. A lot of times we can't see it because it feels so dark and it looks so dark. So conscientiously look for, or carve out a space to look for joy each day.
That's awesome. Yes, I love that. Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing not only that, but everything, your story, for being open about it, and kind of showing us how you feel about grief itself and what you've learned from grief, not just from the past, but even what you're going through now. So thank you for sharing all that. I'm sure everyone's also very thankful and seeing how they can relate to it and what they can take from it. So I appreciate you participating and sharing that with us.
Well, Laura, thank you for giving me the opportunity. You're a beautiful soul, and thank you for bringing more light into the world.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. You're too kind. And thank you guys also for watching the From Mourning to Meaning interview series. I hope you guys took a lot from that one, and we'll be back with another one. Bye, guys.